All right, so here we go with a factor by grouping where a is not equal to 1. So as we just saw in the last video, when a is equal to 1, we can kind of use a different method of factoring. But here, a is actually equal to 4. Why is nothing writing? Ax squared plus bx plus c. So a is actually 4 here, and c is 10. So when we do factoring by grouping, the first thing that we want to do is multiply our a times our c, and we get 40. The second thing we want to do is find the factors of 40. So we find the factors of 40. I get 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, and 5 and 8. And I'm looking for which of these factors, which of these can add or subtract, so sum, which of these can sum to -3? That is the question. That is supposed to be a 3. There we go. -3. And the answer is 5 and 8. It has to be 5 and 8. So when I do this, my a comes down, 4x squared, my leading term comes down, my constant comes down, -10. What happens to the b value, though, is that it splits. So we're going to split that between 5x and 8x. And I have to determine what are the signs that I'm going to be putting on 5 and 8. Well, this is a -3, so that means that my 8 has to be negative. The bigger number has to be negative. And if you remember from class, I kind of like to do this with it the other direction, so that way I don't accidentally run into an error later with a negative. So I like to put the negative first and then the positive second, if that's a possibility. So now I'm going to ask myself, all right, well, what's the greatest common factor over here between 4x squared and -8x? Well, the greatest common factor is actually going to give me 4x. And I'm going to be left over with x minus 2. So then the same thing. I look over here. I'm like, all right, well, what can I factor out? 5 and 10 have 5 in common. So I factor out 5. And I'm left with x minus 2. Well, look at that. I have an x minus 2 here and an x minus 2 here. If those two things don't match, then you did something wrong. So now that I know that I'm on the right track because they matched, my last step is to factor that out, because that's a greatest common factor because they both have it. And then I'm left over with 4x plus 5. And that's it. That's factoring by grouping when a is not equal to 1.